You have been asked to give a persuasive speech. Are you ready? Well, here's the deal. When it comes to persuasive speaking, there's just an added layer that you need to think about. In persuasive speaking, you're not simply informing your audience about a topic, you are trying to persuade them towards your topic. Persuade them that what you're saying is the better way of doing things. Persuade them that what you're saying is true. Persuade them that your policy is the better policy. You are talking about people's belief systems and possibly changing their viewpoint. It's a big deal. So before you get into your topic, before you decide what your persuasive speech will be about, there are a few things to think about. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to get a piece of paper out or get your notes out on your computer, because I want you to write down the 3 different types of persuasive speeches. That's right. You need to consider what type of speech you are giving, because each of them will involve different elements. Each of them will involve a different approach. And so you want to know which type of persuasive speech you are going to give. Do you have that piece of paper out? Or maybe do you have that computer ready to go? Here we go. The first type of persuasive speech is called a question of fact. A question of fact speech. This kind of persuasive speech is going to deal with the truth or falseness of a subject. For instance, the moon landing did happen. Now, there's conspiracies out there as to whether or not it did or did not happen. There are different approaches, there are different thought processes on the moon landing. So this is the question of fact. You would be taking a firm side, not in the middle. In the middle does not work in persuasion. You would be taking a firm side saying, yes, I am going to persuade you that the moon landing did happen, or I am going to take the stance and persuade you that the moon landing did not happen. You would choose a side and you would give a speech based on the facts you have found on whichever side you take. Okay, Bigfoot does exist. Whether or not you believe it or not, I've heard this speech before. And so there could be the question of fact, does he or does he not exist? So you would take the firm side of, yes, Bigfoot does exist, and my speech is going to point you in the direction that Bigfoot does exist. Or no, Bigfoot does not exist, and my speech is going to point you in that. The facts are going to point you in that direction. Let's do one more, just to give you a broad spectrum of what you could give your speech about. Disneyland is the best theme park. And you would go with your research that would point you in the direction that it is, in fact, the best theme park based off of your information, or no, it is not based off of your information. Now, here's the deal. A question of fact speech without proper support turns into an opinion piece. Without the evidence that is out there, it turns into an opinion piece really quickly. And persuasion is not about opinion. Yes, you have an opinion, but in order to persuade your audience in the right direction that you are trying to take them, you need to have evidence. Evidence outside of just your opinion. Now, your personal experience with the topic is fine, and you can add that in, but you need outside evidence. This is not a moment to just give an opinion piece. And if you do, your persuasive speech is going to have a lot of holes in it. There will be a lot of things that your audience could argue against, all right? So you must have evidence and not just make this your opinion. This goes to all the different types, but make sure it is filled, that your evidence is solid. You wanna make sure it is great standing evidence that would stand up to your audience, all right? Question of fact, that's the first one. Your next type of persuasive speech is called a question of value. And this is where we're going to question or persuade in one direction the value or worth of something. The value of this topic, the worth of this topic, in the sense of, A right and wrong. That's where we're talking. Something is right, something is wrong. This is where you'll get into a lot of different ideas and feelings. And when you are going to question something's rightness or wrongness, you have to approach it carefully. All right? You must make sure that you handle this with care. So, question of value. One way for you to find a variety of question of value speeches is if you were to look at an election and you would look at the different propositions. There's a lot of right or wrongness on what each side is taking as a right or wrongness for those propositions. Those propositions are a great place to find question of value speech. But a question of value speech could look like this. You could talk about something like as serious as capital punishment, all right? And you would pick a side. Capital punishment is a right thing, and here's why. Capital punishment is not a right form of punishment, and here's why. You cannot be in the middle of this. You have to pick a side. In the middle is not a persuasive speech, all right? You are persuading one way or the other. Question of value. It is right or wrong to enforce school uniforms at school. And you would talk about, yes, it is right, and here are the reasons why it is right. It is wrong, and here are the reasons it is wrong. Question of value. You would be questioning the right or wrongness of a topic. Okay, so that's question of value. The right or wrongness. You are persuading in that direction. Is something right, and you're going to want to persuade towards what your right thing is, but you would probably show the opposite side as well in the sense of this is why my thing is right. Does that make sense? The right or wrongness. Okay, our third type of persuasive speech. Are you ready? So we did question of fact, that was one. Question of value, that was two. Next is question of policy. Again, you could look towards those things that are happening, those hot topics out there, and you would approach it in the policy sense, not necessarily the value. So this is where you are trying to change the status quo. You want to take a policy and say, I'm going to persuade you that this policy is the right way. Maybe you've come up with a new policy, and so you're going to persuade towards that new policy. Or maybe you're just wanting to point people in the direction of a certain policy. This is the right policy, and you're going to point them in that direction. Question of policy. Now here's the deal. A lot of your speeches in question of value could end up in a question of policy speech. You could give that very same speech on capital punishment, but it would be talking about the policy behind it. Maybe there'd be a little bit of the right or wrongness behind it, whatever your stance would be, but you would be approaching this in the sense of the policy itself. What is written, and whether or not you are agreeing with that policy or challenging the status quo and challenging a policy. All right, so question of policy. Again, that school uniform one could be in that question of policy speech as well. It would just be different. It would be challenging or agreeing or disagreeing with a policy in play. Does that make sense? One is questioning the right or wrongness. That's question of value. One is questioning the policy in it. Now here's the deal. With all of these, especially with your last two, they could be very similar speeches. And that is why it is so important that you decide which category you are persuading from. It is important for you to know, am I questioning the fact, right? Am I questioning this is truth, this is truth? Am I questioning the value? Am I questioning the right or wrongness? Or am I questioning the policy or pointing in a new direction of a different policy? It's very important to decide this before you get into your speech writing, because this will determine what you are going to want to gather and research and what you are going to want to say to your audience. You need to decide this. It may seem like a silly, tedious thing, but it will save you from having a speech that is all over the place, hard to understand, and then leaving your audience going, I don't even know what they're talking about. This will help you with clarity. This will help you with staying focused in your research, and this will help you with time. So you want to decide, am I giving a question of fact speech? Am I giving a question of value speech? Or am I giving a question of policy speech? So here's what I want you to do right now. So you took out a piece of paper or you took notes on your computer, and you have 3 categories: question of fact, question of value, and question of policy. For the next 5 minutes, I want you to spend time writing and brainstorming all the different ideas you come up with, all the different ideas that first come to your mind. To be honest, oftentimes those first things we write down, the first ideas, are at the forefront of our mind anyways. They're things we're instantly interested in, or maybe already have information about, or maybe we're already experts in this topic. And so those first ideas are usually the ideas that are really, really right there in the beginning. And if we choose from this brainstorm session, you're probably picking something you're interested in, know something about, want to know more about, and it starts your process right away. Wouldn't it be great to have your persuasive speech topic right now today? So 5 minutes. I want you in each category to write the first 10 things that come to mind. And here's the deal. Oftentimes with persuasive speeches, we go in a very serious route, and that's fine. You can do serious topics. That's great. But also know that there's persuasion all over the place. Just like we talked about, is Disneyland the best theme park? That could be a speech. It could be another speech that's a little less serious. Could be something like, going to a live theater performance is better than going to the movie theater. And you would add your research in there. These are just a few ideas, or why something should be a sport that is not a sport already. Does that make sense? You can go for a serious topic that you would find in a proposition, or that is a highly debated topic. You can, but you can also go with something else that you're passionate about, or something else that you're interested in, or something else that you have personal experience with that would be less serious as well. Persuasion is all over the place. We see it in so many different ways. And so this is just the beginning, but for now, take the next 5 minutes and write the first 10 things that come to mind for each category. And hopefully this brainstorming session will just help you to pick your speech quickly.